Well, would it not be possible that some of the problems with Governor Burns came from the 1944 nomination in conflict?
Would it not be possible, Mr. President, that some of your difficulties with Mr. Burns subsequently arose from the fact that he felt that he should have been there in the White House where you were?
That might be the case. I'm not in a position to say.
Back to one camera. What do you miss most of the White House?
Speaking of Mrs. Truman, did you consult her often while you were in the White House?
Always, and all the time in my public life, Mrs. Truman and I have been in partnership on everything that's done.
Did you say grace at meals in those early days?
Did you say grace at meals in those early days?
Grace is always said, I didn't always say it.
Did you go barefooted when you were a boy?
Yes, up to the time I was about 10 years old. After that, I didn't go barefooted much.
Where did you swim?
In the Big Blue River right west of the farm home.
What was the first?
When were you first interested in serious reading?
When did you first become interested in serious reading?
Well, I might... I was 11 years old.
A little more level, Mr. President. What's the clearest memory you had of World War II? World War I.
What's the clearest memory you retain of World War I?
Well, it was most interesting.
Fine. What was the most depressing time you had in World War I?
What was the most depressing time you had in World War I?
And the colonel made my battery double-timed.
Who was the best conversationalist you ever met?
Who was the best conversationalist you ever met?
Winston Churchill.
The ability to tell a story, important part to being a good senator.
Well, the ability to tell a good story is a very important part of being a successful senator.
That's true.
Why do so many of the good storytellers come from the South?
Why do so many of the good storytellers come from the South?
That I can't answer unless it's customary to make stuffed shirts out of the Northerners.
Why do so many of the good storytellers come from the border states and the South?
Well, the border states have to be in a position of compromise, and good stories help a compromise.
Were you depressed when your store closed?
Were you depressed when your clothing store closed?
Of course. Any man would be depressed under those circumstances, worried about paying his debts and things of that sort.
And one book. Speaking of writing, what are the essentials of a good political speech?
Speaking of writing, Mr. President, what are the essentials of a good political speech?
It must be in a condition to be put over. And I always thought short paragraphs and short sentences and short speech was the way to do it.
What was the most important thing that happened to you and your team?
What was the most important thing that happened to you and your teams?
I forgot what my answer was.
Where did your military service begin?
Where did your military service begin?
My military service began when I was 21 years old as a charter member of Battery B.
Okay, very short answers on these, like one word, Mr. President.
All right.
Did you get any leave in Paris while over there?
Did you get any leave in Paris?
Yes.
What happened next?
What happened next?
After they leave in Paris, we went down to Nice and had a good time.
Mr. President, and give a full answer on this. Mr. President, I must be a bad reporter. It's necessary at this stage for me to ask you where you learned to play the piano.
Well, Mr. President,
9 or 10 years old, we were able to buy a piano, and I began to take music lessons from Ms. E.C. White, who were the people of the famous Lechtisky.
Okay, that's fine. Ask the question about the Missouri Waltz. You don't need to answer, Mr. President.
All right.
how was it that...
Okay. We've moved from now, and you can answer but briefly. We have now moved from precinct to president. What about the proposal that former presidents be made a member of the Senate?
Well, we have now rather traveled from precinct to president. What about the members of the United States Senate?
I think it's a good thing, and I think it ought to be done.
I take it that you feel that when a president is out of office, he continues to be the head of the political party.
I take it that you feel that when a former president is out of office, he continues to be an influential member of his party and should act in that fashion.
That's correct. He should continue to be an influential member of his party. They've done everything in the world for him, and he ought to do something for them.
In that relation, you did not remain neutral in Chicago in '56.
And in that connection, you chose not to remain neutral in Chicago in 1956.
That's correct. I think every man has a right to express his opinion.
And now, Ed, label and invite the questions that
I won't dig you, boy.
Oh, the one about,
Oh, yes.
labor relations.
Right. This next brief discussion is going to be held in the possession of the Truman Library, not to be released until such time as the printed matter relating to the same subject is also released. This has to do with Mr. Truman's relationship with Mr. Stevenson during the two campaigns.
You don't favor open and free selection of then you don't favor open and free selection of the vice president.
Then you're not entirely in favor of an open and free selection of the vice presidential candidate.
I think the selection ought to be as open and free as possible, but it is absolutely essential that the vice president should be in complete agreement with the nominee for president.
You've had almost 8 years in the White House. You had almost 8 years in the White House. What is your estimate of the Senate?
What is your estimate?
Attributes of a good president.
Sorry. Mr. President, you had almost 8 years in the White House. What do you regard as the...
He must have political experience. He must be able to make a decision.
What about toughness under criticism?
What about...
And get under his skin and never get anything done.
What essentially is...
The representative of all the people, and he has to fill that role all the time.
How do you account for the fact that during your terms in office you had the constant support of labor?
How do you account for the fact that during your period in office you had the constant support of labor?
Well, we thought I was fair to them, and I was just as fair to the employer as I was to labor, and most of the employers felt the same way about it.
You wanted a winner in 1956. Do you still feel Harriman would have done better than Stevenson?
This again is part of the material that will be left in the Truman Library. You wanted a winner in 1956. Do you still feel that Harriman would have done better than Stevenson?
Yes, I do. I thought he was better qualified, and I think he'd have made a better campaign.
Do you think the limitation on the third term was a wise amendment?
Do you think the
Term business should be by policy and precedent.
So then they hated Roosevelt so much that they made a lame duck
Right now.
Mr. President, you eventually did get to bring your mother to the White House for a visit.
Mr. President, you did eventually bring your mother to the White House for a visit, didn't you?
I'm very happy that I was able to do it.
How would you describe the fair deal?
How would you describe the fair deal?
The fair deal is the successor to the New Deal. And the New Deal was set up after the Depression to give every citizen of the country a fair chance at good things in life, as well as just a small percentage of the population. And the fair deal was a continuation of that same policy. Not any material difference between them except the name.
You were saying earlier that ridicule helped in campaigning and politics. Did the given hell technique help a Christian?
No. You were saying earlier that ridicule was helpful in politics. Would you think that the phrase, "Give 'em hell, Harry," helped you in 1948?
Well, I was always sorry that that phrase became a part of the campaign. I used to tell them that I didn't give them hell, I just told the truth on them, and they thought it was hell.
One of your important advisors when you first took over was a Republican, Secretary of War Stimson. Would you like to talk about him?
Well, when you first went to the White House, one of your principal advisors was a Republican, Secretary Stimson. Would you like to talk about him a little?
I was very fond of Secretary Stimson. He was an able, honored to begin with because he made the suggestion when Japan went into Manchuria that they ought to be stopped, and they should have been.
Okay, 2 cameras. We will end up with probably President Truman just having discussed what makes a great president and an honest president and so forth. And this is the end of the whole piece.
Right. Mr. President, in your view, what are the qualifications for a successful president?
Well, we must, in the first place, be familiar with the political setup that is necessary for a man in politics to know. He's got to be honest, honorable, upright.
Sum it up and thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, for sitting here for 4 days on the Florida Keys and the hell my back were as straight as yours.
You know, my mother, when I was a kid,
Okay,
I'd
once
hump
again,
over,
please.
she'd walk up and hit me.
Look out over this flat country. So, and just lying there flat as piss on a plate.
Okay. And again, and this time make the president do the talking.
May the 8th, which happens to be my birthday, and then we're dedicated.
Everybody in Missouri will be there.
I hope so. Yes, I hope so.
Okay, keep going, Charlie. Thank him, and then both of you walk out together, and it's over, all over.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It's been a very pleasant 4 days.
Thank you very much. I've had a most pleasant time. Come on out here. I'm going to tell you Sam Rosenman's story.
I remember seeing you leave Washington at the end of your term, and as that train pulled out, all the people standing about, what were your feelings at the time?
Well, it was an emotional moment. It was estimated by the police that there were 9,000 people in that station to see a man who was cruised go back home. And that usually doesn't happen. So, of course, it left a very strong impression on us.
Probably be finding a lot of coconuts around here in the course of the next few days, and perhaps we will find some meat in terms of discussing what happened during your term of office and something of what you think will happen in the course of the next few years. Shall we go in the house here at the Olney Inn and sit and chat for, the next 4 days at intervals as to what you remember from your term of office and what you think may be happening next?
Well, I'll be glad to tell you as much as I can. And I hope it'll be of use both for you and historically.
You know, this will be the first time, Mr. President, that there has ever been made on film an historic record of what a president thought when he was in office and after he left it.
Wouldn't it be a fine thing if we had that for all the presidents?
Wouldn't it?
We'd know what motivated them, because they'd surely tell the truth. Most presidents do.
Particularly after they're president, is that right?
That's right, particularly after they're president.
Well, let's go in, Mr. President, and sit down here in this delightful room and chat for a bit, shall we?
Be glad to do that.
After you say. 9,000 people down to see you when you left?
9,000 people estimated by the police to be on the platform in the Washington Union Station. It was heartwarming and a very emotional affair. Mrs. Truman and Margaret and I all were very highly pleased and very nearly overcome by such a, I wouldn't say a reception, such a going-away party.
Were you surprised to see so many people
Yes,
turn up to see you off?
I was very much surprised to see so many people turn out.
Your memories, and also something of what you think may happen in the course of the next 15 or 20 years.
Well, I'll be glad to tell you the best I know how and give you any information that I have on any subject that you want to ask me about during that period.
Well, this will be the first time, I think, in history that anyone has ever tried to make a visual document for history so that 25, 50 years from now, youngsters who are studying politics and history may have an opportunity to sit down and not only read your words and your thoughts, but actually see you and listen to you while you're saying them.
Well, it'd be a wonderful thing, though, if we had that for all the presidents.
Wouldn't it?
I know we'd learn a great deal more about history and the facts of history if we had the actual statements of the men who made it.
Well, Mr. President, let's go in and sit down and start chatting. May we?
I'm in favor of it.
Thank you, sir. I think so. Sir. Would you be quiet, please?
No conversation.
Mr. President, this will be the first time, so far as I know, that a former president has ever sat down for about 4 days, for 2 or 3 hours a day, and just talked about his office and what he remembers. Other presidents have written books, their memoirs and so forth, and I think we shall enjoy ourselves here, don't you?
I'm sure of it, and I wish it...